in my honor and privilege to welcome Lord Meghna Desai for this session. Meghna Jagdish Chandra Desai is a British economist and Labour politician. He has been awarded the Padma Bhushan, the third highest civilian award in the Republic of India in 2008. He wrote his first book, Marxian Economic Theory, in 1973. Desai has written extensively, publishing over 200 articles in academic journals and had a regular volume in the British Radical Weekly Tribune, in the Indian Business Daily Business Standards, and in Indian Express and Financial Express. From 1984 to 1991, he was co-editor of the Journal of Applied Econometrics. A selection of his academic papers was published in 2 volumes as the selected essays of Meghna Desai in 1995. To be in conversation with him, we have Isha Datta from Ehsaas Women of Kolkata. To take the session forward, I would like to welcome them to start this session. So please enjoy yourself.
Okay, I'm going to start with the preface. In your preface, you say this book celebrates 70 years of Indian independence, but it is not a celebratory book. Why? Nothing much to celebrate?
Well, a celebratory book is very often uncritically celebratory. And while I celebrate Indian independence, I also point out that there are problems. I don't think I could do either a unvarnished celebration or unvarnished critique. So that's why. It is not like, we are the greatest ever, none of that. Yes, we are independent, 7 years, it's been very useful. And I think there are remarkable things which are unique about India. It is the world's largest democracy and one of the most stable democracies. In the 29 elections, we'll have 1 billion people on the electoral register, which is not a bad record to have. But at the same time, I'm very well aware that there are issues, there are problems, and I still think that India is below its potential. It could have done much better.
Okay, so
that's what my teachers used to say about me. Don't do better.
So the model of democracy, like you said, post-independence was modeled on the Westminster model.
Yeah.
It was fashioned on the Westminster model. But given the diverse conditions in India, with its region, with the language, its culture, it had to be Indianized. So that leads us to your title, the Raisina model. Okay, so why don't you tell us something about this, the Indianization, so to speak.
Yeah, in a sense, the first few years, I'm old enough to remember the first few years, the people who are in Parliament, people who have been in leadership, people who have been in Parliament, very often behaved as if they were in London, Westminster. You look at the methodical way in which they conducted Parliament, the speeches made, the conventions followed. They were all followed from the British Parliament, and you have some very, very strong, angry discussions and debate where the Prime Minister has to really, stand up and defend his position again and again. And if you look at the China debate, and it is absolutely astonishing how strongly Nehru was criticized for the China debacle. And so that continues. Then I think, for various reasons, from mid-60s onwards, the thing hits a crisis. And it begins to be, Ramanohar Lohia was a man who sort of Indianized to begin with, setting about anti-Congress coalitions. And then, of course, following the emergency. Emergency is a very interesting experiment because it is the most absolutely legal way of having a dictatorship. And all the laws that Indira Gandhi used were there before independence. And they were not changed. The most remarkable thing about Indian independence was that nothing in the legal constitution was changed at all. The Indian Penal Code is still there. And all the emergency rules were established by the British. So, if the continuity of the colonial Raj, with almost no break, the guys who were in jail went into the Prime Minister's house, as it were. And they knew how to behave. See, that's the thing. They knew precisely how a British Prime Minister would behave. My favorite story is, if you go read the first 5-year plan, the first early pages, there is a letter addressed to the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. It's signed by Jawaharlal Nehru, Chairman of the Planning Commission. Now, he did that because he wanted to make clear that by proper British standard, he was not ex officio Chairman of the Planning Commission. He was Chairman of the Planning Commission over and above being Prime Minister. Now, that degree of meticulousness, where did it come from? It came from a colonial regime. But then what happens? Sorry to being a teacher, I give long answers. Why shouldn't?
Please go ahead.
It breaks down partly in a emergency, because the response to the emergency, the Janata government, is purely Indian. A totally ideology-free coalition. People who never talk to each other suddenly comes together only to get down on this government. And then of course Mandal happens. And Mandal completely Indianized Indian democracy. Because until early there were parties, ideological parties, left, right, Communist Party, Socialist Party. And suddenly there are vote bank parties, there are family parties. Congress became the first family party when Indira Gandhi, split the Congress and made it into her private party. But suddenly we have a Yadav party and a Dalit party and things like that. And that's completely Indianized democracy. Because that is what the country is all about. The social structure, the caste structure is always more important than a class structure. The communists never realized this, which is why they are nowhere, and RSS is so powerful. If you look at, they both founded at the same time, 1925. And the RSS is about to have its centenary and run the country for what it is worth. So, Indian politics became Indianized after Mandal, in which now the democracy is a kind of a vast sea of a little jati politics and coalitions and things like that. But it is a democracy. And it works along the sort of particular lines in which Westminster democracy taught us how to conduct ourselves. And that is, it's the first major cultural adaptation of Westminster model anywhere in the world. Even the Americans didn't quite change it that much as we have done.
From time to time in India has been threatened with disintegration. There have been different parts of the city, parts of the country, like the Northeast. They've been totally alienated and they don't even consider themselves part of the mainland.
Oh, absolutely. You see, I also, this is way before I wrote this book, one of my first articles on Indian politics was to argue that India is a collection of nations, that they really are separate nations. Each linguistic state is a separate nation. It has a history. India doesn't have a national history. It's completely on part of the nationalists and others. There was a single country. You compare India to China, and India was never a single country. In Gujarat, Shivaji was a looter and a thief who robbed Surat. You can't say it now. So he's not a hero. In Bengal, Shivaji is not a hero. But in Maharashtra, he's a hero. And so there are adjoining states in which the villains and heroes are the same people. In Tamil Nadu, for example, for all practical purposes, Tamil Nadu has been an independent country for the last 50 years. Since they threw out Congress in 1967, Tamil Nadu, no national party has gone into Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu has its own two parties and the rest can go to hell. Absolutely, there's no debate about that. And so in Tamil Nadu, Chief Minister can be almost like a Prime Minister. So nobody is going to touch Tamil Nadu. And Tamil Nadu's history, I mean, another thing is, North India doesn't know anything about South Indian history. The whole Hindu nationalist picture of Muslim threats and all that is rubbish. It's all about North India. It's all about Delhi Sultanate. It's not about South India at all. South India is a very different history. So I think the difficulty, and I think India has done very well in the last 70 years, to hang together. And democracy is the one thing which has tied the whole country together, because the way the structure is, every state has some interest in having a friend at the center. And that is the financial links to be together. But culturally, in the Northeast, and when I was in Guwahati, they say, do they think about us? They literally know that, I mean, Assam is not even in the national anthem. I think because the Bengali wrote it, but that's another story. And Assam is, and there was this episode in Mumbai not long ago when the marathon was run, and the woman who won it, they thought she was Chinese and she was just Assamese. And they didn't recognize her as Indian. And so it's like, and at least when I was growing up, every South Indian name sounded strange. And we all thought they were Madrasis, but they were not Madrasis. So I think India is, okay, every country has to pretend it is single. It's a single nation and it has a common history. But India has to both remember that, but also strive very, very hard to make it. And I think this is where democracy is very important. And one thing I have to say about this, about the BJP NDA government, they have done more in the Northeast than I remember any government doing in many, many years. Seriously, a lot of things. Maybe because they needed the vote, but so I think integrating Northeast is going to be difficult, and making parts other than the Hindi heartland feel that they actually belong to the country is also hard work. The Hindi heartland claims too much.
But why do you think that the insurgencies in the Northeast, like the Naga insurgency and the Maoist violence, they haven't captured the public imagination as much as, say, Kashmir?
Well, I say, Indians only care about terrorism if Muslims are involved. Seriously. Nagas have been fighting India since before independence. I remember as a child reading about Fizo, who was living in London and directing this Naga resistance. The Nagaland battle is still not over. I remember once speaking in the Delhi Gymkhana Club and saying, well, Nagaland doesn't actually belong to us. The outrage was amazing. But Nagaland was not actually technically a part of British India. There's no paramountcy, nothing. So when the British left, the Nagaland thought they were independent, and Nehru said nothing to it. Nehru was extremely imperialist in his territorial ambitions, and because the Chinese were shocked. The Chinese thought this nice, progressive, radical socialist will give away the territory the British had taken from the Chinese. And Nehru said nothing doing. Look at the maps. So Nagaland issue, but nobody knows how many people died in Nagaland territory. Nobody knows anything. Why? Because not a single Muslim is involved. So Kashmir matters to us because there are Muslims there and because Pakistan is interested. The Maoist and the Naxalite thing has been going on. And I remember at one stage they say, the Indian army cannot be employed in bombing its own people. It is regularly employed in bombing in the Northeast and in Kashmir. So things are like that. So we have our own little perception problems.
Okay, so more recently, something which you've been talking about some time back, farmer distress, loan wages. It seems to be a hot topic right now. So.
Yeah. No, it again comes from the past because So when we became independent, nobody thought India had a food problem. Nobody thought agriculture had any weaknesses. The only thing was there were zamindars and there were tenants. Give tenants the land they were cultivating, i.e. land tenure distribution was the only issue. Productivity per acre or productivity per person was not an issue. And within 10 years we had food shortages. And so much so that Americans had to send us shiploads of PL 480. And then we had 2 famines in the mid-60s. And at that stage in the Green Revolution, that's the agriculture became a very big thing. And that image of that misery has never left politics. So all the peasants are poor, all farmers are poor, and worthy of our pity. And the Green Revolution changed all that, but we still have that thing. And so I'm against that because I think it no longer is equitable to make an ordinary taxpayer pay for an inefficient farmer. If a farmer is in debt and can't pay it back, he should be declared bankrupt, seize the land and throw it out. That's what we can now do under the Insolvency Act with anybody else. So there's no, a farmer is just a businessman, private sector businessman, and deserves no kindness whatsoever. But unfortunately, no politician will say that because, you know, it's now a part of the script that farmers are poor and miserable. But I think it's time for the urban taxpayer to say that with this we shall not put up. Because the amount of money right now going into farmers' distress is enormous and we could have much better use of it. In health or education or transport or all sorts of things. In urban areas in India need serious injection of money. And they're not getting it because we're paying the distressed farmer money. So I don't see why any businessman should, without questioning, get that debt cancelled. I think that makes no economic sense whatsoever. And it only inculcates a bad habit of not paying back debts. And no country can live like that. Because the money comes from somewhere, and the money comes from you. And I'm not just mean people who are here, everybody else would be, we're all taxpayers. GST means we're all taxpayers. And I think people should seriously ask whether this is logical politics, and it is not. And I think now, this last 6 months has really highlighted because every party has gone berserk given the loan waivers. And Rahul Gandhi is saying, "Hum unko sone nahi denge." Narendra Modi cancel all debts. Can you imagine somebody saying, cancel all debts without examining whether they are who is a debtor? I mean, this man wants to become Prime Minister of India. He ought to do something more than that. I mean, it's not, he didn't study at LSE, so I don't have anything about it. He studied at Cambridge. Cambridge can sort it out. But it will harm the reputation of Cambridge if he becomes Prime Minister.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we now open it up to the audience. Any questions?
Good evening, sir. I'm Colonel Uday Mukherjee. I just wanted to know one thing, keeping this fact of prevailing secularism that we are looking for our country. One or two cases of vigilantism which has happened.
Yeah.
Do you think that the halla which is created after that, is it really worth for it, considering the other domains where India has progressed and shown progresses?
Yeah, I think basically vigilantism as a illegal behavior has to be stopped. It's nothing to do with secularism versus Hindutva or anything like that. That kind of behavior cannot be permitted because people cannot arbitrarily take law into their hands. If it is illegal to transport cattle, it's illegal to transport cattle and the police can look after that. If it is not illegal to transport cattle, nobody can stop it. Simple. It's a law and order problem, it's not a cultural problem. Now, I'm the last friend standing here of Narendra Modi. he is losing them so rapidly. And I am willing to say that I think this government has done lots of good things. I have even no problem with whether they do it under a Hindu flag or whatever flag they want to do it under. Politics is a branding, you need branding in politics and you can choose your own branding. Then that's all right. I mean, I'm not worried about the big, deep cultural battle versus Napoleon and all that. That's all rubbish. I'll let that be. But I think behavior which violates the rights of citizens arbitrarily cannot be tolerated and should not be tolerated. And I think, again, I think it's a Hindi heartland problem. It is not a general problem of India. And I think I think what happened in Bulandshahr was beyond belief bad. And it really should have been condemned much more severely than it was. So, I care about that. And part of the vigilantism has happened is because, I wrote about this, at the state level, the police have become much more dependent upon the politicians than used to be the case. Every time a new government comes, they start transferring police. They start transferring police and start transferring civil servants. Why? Because they have their own favorites they can bring in, and they bring in their favorites because they want an easier time. So to that extent, the police politics really much more poisoned at the state level than we realize. And so, BJP is in power, the police know to go soft on certain kinds of behavior, and that cannot be. That's where I think we have. And I think citizens ought to be much more articulate in complaining about it, and not just leave it to the sophisticated quarters. But I think it's happening. What you see, what's very encouraging, is like when a woman dies, especially when a woman dies through violence or something like that, there is fantastic upsurge in what's happening in Gaya, for example. And that's quite right. Women have decided they're not going to take that rubbish anymore. It happened in Banaras Hindu University a while ago. They're not going, and I think that the articulation of protest by women and the use of social media by them is a very positive thing. And I think that's what's more needed. You have to, and I think if public pressure is put, then the police behave themselves. I think that your worry is good with the social media is that a technology now exists. You can immediately beam it to the TV station, and it becomes news, and then you get the system responding. The system will respond if a fuss is created. And I think that has been one of the most encouraging things.
The polarization of the media is also not helping to it, actually.
Sorry?
Polarization of the media in India presently.
I don't even know that, you think it's like branding. You want to go for different section of, especially in the English-speaking TV, which is a very small cachet of the total population. The Hindi TV gets much more coverage. In the English thing, there is intense competition, and they do go ideologically. So the Republican Times now have captured the BJP market, and the rest have to do whatever they have to do. And so what do? You can get a little reputation as anti-Modi, and you get a little bit more, TRPs. But that is all right, and that doesn't bother me very much, because none of it is serious. So yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
Mike is coming your way.
Sir, I will like your comments about the super activism of judiciary. How it is going to help the democracy?
You see, the judiciary is active because Parliament is not. If Parliament could pass laws, let's say 377 or whatever it is, in Parliament could have just said 377 is removed from Indian Penal Code. Court won't have to do anything. And where the courts have become powerful is very interesting. justices of the Supreme Court were appointed by the executive, the president on advice of the prime minister. This collegium business is entirely invented by the judiciary for itself. It has no constitutional basis whatsoever. They cite their own judgments in defense of the collegium, but the collegium has actually no constitutional basis. Why has it arisen? Because of years of weak coalition governments between, after Indira Gandhi had done the damage, between 1989 and 1998, the Supreme Court became very powerful. And now it is untouchable. But I think by and large, on social reform, there is no courage in the political system. And Supreme Court has done that. And to the extent that Supreme Court is this is not liked, we have a drifting situation like on triple talaq. In a triple talaq, Supreme Court has got a decision. We need a law. We can't get a law. On Sabarimala, the decision by the two leading parties, BJP and Congress, are bent on not having it implemented.
Good evening, sir. Sir, mobile phones play a very major role today. So, since you were talking about digitization, the apps we use nowadays, mostly they are not Indian apps. So, isn't it a paradox, digitization being a paradox in India, the way we are digitizing?
Why then we don't have our own equipment?
We do have, but the media, the phones and the apps which we are using, mostly they are not the Indian apps.
But it's done by India.
That's all right. I'm relaxed about it. I'm not a Swadeshi person. India is really very good at software, not at hardware. And we just borrow hardware and do our own software. I mean, Bollywood is the best example of it. Bollywood has been a fantastic success. We never had its own machines, no Indian-made cameras or sound equipment, nothing like that. We just write the songs and the script, and that's what sells. The first generation of Indian leaders were obsessed about hardware. It wrecked the economy. Stick to software.
Yeah. Sir, may I? Yeah. So what's your opinion about this recent CBI thing? By thinking, considering this BJP government, both the time NDA has removed the CBI director, as the Congress is saying so, and also I think that this government is taking many such decisions, which is in terms of, because they have extreme power in the house, they're taking such decisions which is not right decision to take, but they are enforcing those decisions because they're in the power. As the Telegraph said today in the front, like, are we all donkeys?
Yeah. No, I tell you what, let's get back to the beginning of independence. In the beginning of independence, the colonial state has established certain sort of conventions and limits, mainly copying from the UK. So that further BBC is autonomous or independent in the UK. The University Grants Commission is independent or autonomous in the UK. India has a University Grants Commission, India has a Doordarshan, but under no condition could you argue that it was independent of the government. So there is a facade of institutions which everybody thinks ought to be legally autonomous. But, in a sense, India is a demotic country in which the elected people think they have the supreme power to do anything they want to do. And because they have been elected, there are no challenges to them. So every government, party of every government has behaved atrociously towards people like CBI. And they set these things up themselves, the CVC thing. And then they proceed to abuse power systematically. CBI has been systematically abused over the years, as the CVC has been abused, as has been whatever the Commission for Information. I don't know why they send these things out. We can set them up and then they control them. So that there are no politics-free spaces left which have to do with implementation of law. The police is no longer independent. The army just about is. But, and so at some stage there will have to be, I think this will have to be the citizens' responsibility. Political parties are not going to do this. And I don't know how citizens can organize, but citizens will have to insist on some kind of rules and regulations whereby the government has to behave properly. I mean, before private television came, you only had Doordarshan. And Doordarshan did not broadcast the destruction of the Babri Masjid. You had to the BBC to find that out. And that is true. Doordarshan was completely controlled by the government. Total abuse of power. But that was in the secular days, so that was all right. The BJP can't do it, but the Congress can do it. No, but seriously, there has been total failure to set up institutions independent of the politically elected government. Because politically elected government doesn't think it should have any limits on its own powers. Except the judiciary. The judiciary is the only thing which has stayed independent. And that's because of it's the precedents and the legal tradition. But otherwise, it is amazing that in CBI the number one accuses number two, and number two accuses number one, and they both simultaneously have to be sacked, not once but twice. It's unheard of. And why should anybody believe anything the CBI ever says? So it's not a caged parrot, it's a dead parrot.
I request Mr. Prashant Bangaroth-Shisamen, the presenter of this series, to come and give the memento as a mark of appreciation to Lord Desai and Isha Dutta.
You're all requested to just collect a copy of the book, the Raisina model. It's available, and I think Lord Desai will be happy to sign them.
Okay, sure.